Johnny! I'll be back.
And you will know my name is the Lord. And I'm walking here. I'm walking here.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that. Groovy.
Seriously, how fucked up is it that we're getting a Suicide Squad movie that isn't directed by Joe Carnahan?
Yeah, something's wrong with the universe.
Speaking of things being wrong with the universe, this is a very mini bop.
It's so many you can't even see it.
So small.
And we are doing... What year did it come out? 2012? The remake of Maniac, starring Elijah Wood, whatever year it came out.
It was 2013.
It'll be in the title where this is posted, and you will already have known that information, so there was no real point in me bringing it up. But this film is technically a remake, so it bears being said, and it does in fact star Elijah Wood.
I'm very curious. Have you ever seen the original Maniac?
Unfortunately, no. It seems like my kind of schlock.
Yeah, it's always been held up as like the ultimate trashy 80s slasher movie. I've seen the trailer to it, and good lord.
It looks trashy. It looks beautiful.
It looks like one of the fake trailers from Grindhouse.
It really does. Or Bitch Killer.
I was about to say.
And that's why it's kind of hilarious that the remake of it is a work of cerebral art.
Very much so. This is one of the best examples of taking the absolute bare bones of an original movie and just making your own thing with it. I'm convinced the only reason this is even a remake of Maniac is out of some weird artistic, ironic thing. Like, look what I have done with Maniac.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Like, it feels like an act of pop art.
Because it is random, like, why would you remake Maniac? Why would you remake Maniac like this as a festival movie?
Yeah, because this is very much so like an art house slasher movie, if there ever was one.
Oh, it so is.
The key gimmick to Maniac is it's told almost 100% through first-person perspective, with Elijah Wood's voice being really the only thing you see of Frank, the main character, other than a couple of images of him in the mirror, and I think there's like 2 wraparound shots where it goes out of his point of view.
Yeah, it seems to be used in kind of deliberate manners. Mostly during murders, I think.
Yeah, which is great. So this really amazing out-of-body experience where you get so used to it being POV that whenever it pulls out of that, it's very jarring.
Very, because I was curious if the gimmick would be too gimmicky when I first heard about it, and kind of POV movies tend to be a little bit stuttering. Like it's hard to maintain that in a way where it's not it doesn't seem like it's coming off as a trick constantly. Look at us, our hands are in front of the camera or something like that. But you forget the movie's POV maybe 90% of the time, and I kind of liken it to, I felt like I was on a serial killer roller coaster.
Very much so. It kind of feels like those old, like a good version of those old games from the early 90s, where it's like, guide Christopher Walken through this murder investigation. That's an actual game, I promise you.
It is.
I've said for years that it always confuses me that with found footage movies, they jump through all of these hoops to explain why a camera is there and to maintain the illusion of the camera being there throughout the film, when they could just shoot it from a character's POV. Like, you see this very much in Frankenstein's Army, where there's not even a justifiable reason for there to be a color camera with a microphone in the middle of World War II.
But it's fun, ain't it?
Oh, Frankenstein's Army is the shit. Box Office Pulp recommends Frankenstein's Army.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that is the fastest we've ever brought out Box Office Pulp guy.
And Cody's not here.
I know.
Beat Cody at his own game.
Box office pulp guy resents being drawn to the Civil War.
But no, I see what you're saying, which is just why don't more things? I think why don't more things do POV?
Cut out the middleman.
Yeah, but I do think there's probably I'd be curious if Maniac was the wide release, if there'd be a lot of too smart for their own good general audience members and douchebags on the internet going, why is it in his POV? Why isn't there an explanation as to why the movie's taking place in his POV?
Yeah, people these days really want there to be a tangible reason for stylistic choices. It always baffles me.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of like saying, why is there a god camera filming everything that is not actually there?
I always pretend I'm a ghost haunting the movie.
Me too.
Ooh, motherfucker.
I'm right on Megan Fox's ass. But, yeah, but another thing with the POV in the film, I mean, I thought it really, the idea of it, you're in the POV of a serial killer hunting down girls, it seems very exploitive.
Yeah.
In how it would go about that, but instead, I think it really heightens the terror in the actual murder scenes, because you feel like you as the audience are on these rails and you cannot stop. And it really makes you feel for the characters being killed, more than it's just you're watching them on a camera kind of sterile, being murdered by the serial killer. They're more than just victims. It's like you want the camera to stop moving at a certain point.
Which I think is a fascinating dynamic where the subjects are actually more humanized by taking perspective away from them and you seeing them solely through the perspective of another character. Because when that happens, you're no longer watching a movie. You're watching people the way you watch people in real life. Except you're doing horrible things, and that's viscerally disturbing.
Yeah.
Because in this movie, you are Frank.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just the way they have you experience his migraines or his varied hallucinations.
Yeah, they do. That's something I was not expecting going in. There are these amazing in-camera hallucinations that they never put too much focus on. So it's a lot of times it's really subtle things. Like there's a dinner scene early in the movie where Frank is on a date and starts having a migraine and acting weird, and he looks around and suddenly every single person in the restaurant is frozen in place, staring at him with blank expressions on their faces. And the movie never pokes you in the ribs and says, "This is an illusion."
Because there's a similar scene later on in a pharmacy, and you don't even know if that's an hallucination or not.
Because he wouldn't know, because he's insane.
Yeah. It's really oft-putting, and it makes you as the audience not be able to trust what you're seeing, because it's the ultimate unreliable narrator, because your main view into the film is through Frank's head. And nothing Frank does is trustworthy.
It gets very surreal early on whenever you get to Frank's house and there are murder victims just walking around.
Yeah.
And 1 minute they're mannequins and the next minute they're alive.
That really threw me for a loop. I was not expecting that.
Yes, one of the main pillars of this movie is that Frank is pathologically obsessed with mannequins. Which is also why I maintain that this is the most comic-accurate Clayface we've ever seen on camera. I like how they keep the mannequin thing as the thing Frank is obsessed with, but I feel like they don't milk it to supervillain lengths like you would expect they would in a worse movie.
He's not taking a mannequin's hand and using it to kill somebody, or...
He's not Vincent Price turning people into wax dolls. It's not really a gimmick. It's more just a facet of his insanity. Yeah.
But there's one really disturbing part where it's... Yeah, that part near the end, right before he's going over to, what's-her-name's house. And he just turns and he just has the mannequin of him as a little boy, and you don't even know if it's really there or not. Though it is kind of funny because I don't remember. Do you remember the old Buddy Lee Jean commercials?
Yes.
That's all I could think of. That is all I could think of.
Buddy Lee is gonna stop this guy. Like he just kung fu's Elijah Wood. Buddy Lee in Buddy Lee versus the Maniac.
It's this disturbing part because it's like, if the mannequin's real, he made a mannequin of himself as a little boy to talk to it.
So he can yell at it and blame it for murders.
There's little tiny touches that are very unnerving throughout the film.
Yeah, I love how it just drops you right in the middle of this killing spree.
Yeah.
So there are all these little touches to Frank's psychosis that are never fully explained. Like, one of the first scenes of the movie is him waking up next to a mannequin that he refers throughout the movie as his girlfriend. And you never know who the fuck that's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like, you occasionally see her alive where it's just the back of her head. But you don't know, is that someone he made up? Did he kill that person?
Is that supposed to be his mom? It's never very clear.
And there are just, like, extended scenes of him alone in his house talking to his mannequins. And sometimes the mannequins are people, and sometimes he's just talking to mannequins. Sometimes in the same scene.
There's weird stuff where it's like, he'll just walk in, and you did not see him rearrange the mannequins. Like, they didn't show that. But in the background, you'll see the mannequins in really sexual positions. And it's not a focus of anything. It's just in the background. Like, this is what Frank's been doing.
And he's not even aware of it.
Yeah.
It disjars you so much that it puts you in a stressed mental state.
Yes.
Where you don't know if up is down or down is up. It simulates a mental breakdown.
Yeah, like, time does not work the same way when you're in Frank's POV.
Like, the thought I kept having originally watching the movie is, this is the best horror video game I've ever played.
It really is.
Like, he does, and I'm surprised more movies don't approach it this way. It fucks with your head the same way a Silent Hill game or something like BioShock would fuck with your head.
Very much so, yeah.
Like, it fucks with perspective, with the way, like you said, the way you process time. It's extremely visceral.
And on top of all that, you have Wood's performance whenever he's by himself. Because, I mean, talk about polar opposites between, the guy in the original film and then, boy-faced Elijah Wood. Just sounding and being the nicest guy in the world while acting weird and creepy. But whenever he's just talking to his mannequins, he's so blasé normal about everything. While doing and saying fucking crazy shit.
You will never understand the relationship that we share. I love Frank's dialogue in this movie. And what I love about it is it's this guy doing his impression of what a normal person sounds like.
Yes.
And it's just words with the wrong inflection and the wrong phrasing. Because it's just things he's assembled in his head piecemeal from a lifetime of observing people from a distance. Like in the third act, whenever he goes to comfort the girl after her manager's been killed, unbeknownst to her by him, and he just keeps repeating, "I am coming to you in your time of need. Is there anything I can get you? This is a tragedy."
Let me give you a massage again. Like, that's the best parts when he just repeats that. Like, that's a thing that we do, right? Let me give you a massage.
It's like he's the sum total of 30 years of stalking.
Yes. And it takes, like, a lot of things he says, like, with his mannequin stuff is very kind of, would be very schlocky in a different kind of movie. Between how it's presented and Wood's performance really selling it, it just comes across as like you're in this weird carnival of the macabre.
And as far as Wood goes, I mean, it's weird to single out this movie as the performance of his career, but I really believe it is.
Yeah, I mean, he's the entire movie, literally.
And he does that with almost nothing but his voice for 90% of the movie.
His voice and his breath. Like how much he gets across in this movie just by breathing heavy or breathing fast or slowing down his breathing. Because that's what
saying
you hear.
One or two lines.
Yeah.
Because so much of this movie is just silent except for breathing and the occasional, muttered phrase under his breath.
And you occasionally just see him, staring himself in a mirror.
Looking at his teeth for no particular reason because he's insane. So I've always loved for years how after The Lord of the Rings, Elijah Wood was like, yep, I'm just going to play perverts and serial killers from now on.
And damn is he good at it.
See, that's what I respect about Wood is that he realizes that he looks like a creepy child actor. And he milks that for everything it's worth. Which works so great for the character of Frank because you really believe that he's just this 30-year-old little boy.
Oh, yeah. Because we haven't talked about his relationship with his mother, but there's, you're kind of first introduced to it by you hear things in the background in Frank's workshop at first. Like, occasionally you hear something in the distance that sounds like a woman's voice. But then time for Frank is very particular, where suddenly he just starts reliving a memory from his childhood he puts himself as an adult in a closet and peers out as he hallucinates a memory of being a child with his mother coming home, doing cocaine and getting fucked by two guys.
One of them may or may not have been Bob Morton.
Yes, I assume so. She was dressed like the chick from RoboCop, which I like to think was a reference. Oh, I was looking at the credits. I think there's two people who's credited as 80s guy number 1 and 80s guy number 2.
So we directed this movie.
Yes, it blew my mind. But
give the snake more cocaine.
There's this twisted background relationship with his mother, who I guess was a prostitute to a point.
Was a prostitute who also ran an antique mannequin shop, and I love the overlap there.
Yes. Because this is comic book logic now. And it's awesome.
And there's a very clear audible undertone there. It's kind of vaguely implied that there might have been molestation there, but never flat out said.
Yeah.
And what I found fascinating about Frank's backstory there is in a lesser movie, this would be used to give him humanity and make him this tragic character, but really in the end it just makes him more horrible and more fucked up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's actually not a reason to kill women at all.
Yeah. It's like
that's just the thing he wrapped his madness around.
Yeah, like it is not played for sympathy at all. It's played for further madness and flat out horror at times.
And the sympathy stuff is what really stuck with me after watching this movie, because they make a very brave choice that could have backfired on them immensely, which is that they put you in the driver's seat of the serial killer, and not only do they not make him the slightest bit sympathetic, they also give, for the most part, the people he's murdering all of the audience's sympathy. He just kills cool people.
Yeah.
Which, even by itself, I love, because that's the opposite of every single horror movie. It's like, let's have, this person's gonna die in 5 seconds. Let's have them say a bunch of racist stuff so the audience cheers when they die.
So the audience doesn't feel bad, they just watched a murder.
It's like, no, one of the first murders in the movie is Wood killing a woman he meets on the internet, which, by the way, I know you were as riveted by this as I was. The easiest online hookup in the history of mankind.
I just kept thinking the first...
Hey, do you want to fuck? Yes. Where do you want to fuck? Over here. Let's fuck.
I just kept thinking during this, like, okay, this is going to turn out to be a dude. He's going to fight a dude or something. And he still acted weird throughout the entire date, and he still almost got laid. It's insane.
I want to live in the world where online dating is that easy. You put up a profile with no photo within an hour, a very beautiful woman wants to hook up with you.
It's so fucking weird. God, that is a... Murder aside, that is a beautiful world that Frank lives in. Like, that is amazing.
That beautiful 80s world. Like, throughout the date, they just make her really likable and endearing. Like, right up until the murder, where it's just, it's this train wreck you can't pull yourself away from.
Well, it's the thing I always say that horror movies need to do more, which is focus the camera on what's scary. That's why Ju-on is so effective to me, because whenever the ghosts show up, the camera sits there and makes you look at them.
Yes.
So whenever there's a murder in this movie, because you're in Frank's POV, you fucking look at it. You look at it as visceral as it is. So when he's choking Lucy in that scene, you see her face turn. You see the life go out of her. You see her struggle. You see the marks on her neck when he takes his hands off. It makes you feel like you just watched a snuff film.
Yeah, it's like, every time he stabs someone, you feel the fucking knife go in. It doesn't feel like stabbing is so, I can't believe I'm about to say this. Stabbing is so blasé these days.
Yes.
Like, you've seen this in literally every horror movie ever. Like, it has no effect on audiences these days. In this movie, stabbing is fucking horrifying.
Yeah, stabbing is stabbing in this movie.
Like, it's not horror movie stabbing where he plunges the knife into a blood bag and oozes, like, wiggles it around and, like, the scary music plays. It looks like someone is being stabbed to death.
Yeah, the scene in the parking lot is fucking brutal. And because there was so much build up to it too, not just seeing just see him stab all over her body as she rolls around. Because there was so much build up to it. You saw him stalk her for like a 10-minute sequence.
And when, again, going into how other horror movies work, the typical slasher movie trope is to always make the deaths as big and over the top and violent as possible. Like, everyone has to have a Jason Voorhees death. In this movie, it's so fucking real and personal.
Yeah.
That's 1,000 times more affecting, 1,000 times more terrifying.
Yeah, people don't die from big things. You stab them once, they're gonna die. And, being that in your face about it, especially with how seamless the effects are, like the scalping itself is... like, there's so much realism in that effect, in how not just the way the blood looks, but the way the tissue looks underneath, the way you can seal the congealed black blood, which you never see in a movie. Like, movies never get that right.
Yeah, it's not horror movie gore. It's violence.
Yeah, like movies never get like how certain things look right. They always go, it's mostly right, but you pull that underneath skin and all that. There's black blood. There all this weird hanging tissue. To see that in a movie makes it feel like he's ripping your scalp off, because you feel like an actual piece of a human being is coming off.
And that's the biggest takeaway from this movie. Whenever you watch it, you feel like you didn't just see a movie, you had an experience. Like you said, it's like you walked off of a roller coaster.
Yeah, and it's an experience that you think, if you really kind of just look at the plot in a very kind of blasé, brushstroke kind of way, it's like, oh, you're kind of with this guy, he's killing people, and then he kind of gets found out, then he's stabbed, then he hallucinates, and then he dies. It doesn't seem like that really works as a movie.
Yeah, there's no plot to this movie. It's mainly just watching Elijah Wood stalk women.
Yeah, but
somehow it's an experience.
An experience because because of that gimmick, you're delving into a psychologically fucked up human being and seeing what that's like. And you're kind of glad when it's over. Like, when those mannequins come alive and start tearing him apart, not only do you want him to die, but you're kind of just glad to be out of there.
That's why it's so great whenever they pull out of his POV in that moment. It's like, oh, release.
Yeah, with that amazing fucking effect of his face being torn off.
And the mannequin underneath.
Yeah, I've gone back and watched that a couple times. I don't see the effect there. The CGI work in the film is
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen anything like that before, because there's almost no cutaways to anything.
Also, how powerful is the ending of this movie?
Oh, God.
I just love the idea that what finally brings him down isn't there's no police coming in and shooting him down in a blaze of glory. There's no survivor girl, dropping a building on him. He's just crushed by the weight of his own insanity.
Yeah.
The movie becomes too much for him to handle.
Yeah. And I do believe that ending is taken from the original. But I think the hallucination of him killing himself is a little more blatant. You see him, stab himself during the hallucination or whatever. But I think it works far better in this context especially because you've kind of witnessed this weird internal struggle with Frank throughout the film. He's constantly trying to blame other entities on his murder. Constantly, he's doing kind of the Dollarhide and Red Dragon thing. His mother's what is drawing him to kill everyone. So you kind of finally just see it, Frank's finally just gone he's so detached from himself at this point that, yeah, he would fucking kill himself without even knowing it. And like you said, literally the weight of his insanity. He's picturing all of his victims who he thinks is his girlfriends or something come alive and kill him.
On his wedding day.
And he plants himself back in that closet, which I thought was a nice touch.
It's funny, I didn't even interpret that ending as him killing himself. I had always assumed that was just him dying from the injuries of being hit by that fucking car.
Well, I do think it's, he did get stabbed in the gut and got hit by a car. I think he was dying anyway, but I think the fact he was dying is what kind of got the spiral going, that got that hallucination going. I do believe if you look, I think he's holding his switchblade or whatever. And I think it does kind of look like he started to cut off his face when he died. So I do think he was dying and then he hallucinated and then kind of finished himself off. At least that's what I took away from the ending.
There's just something about how the gore goes up to 11 in that scene, and the imagery is so nightmarish and the score is so bombastic. It's just such an epic ending for such a low-key movie.
Yeah.
That it leaves you speechless by the time the credits roll.
Especially when the limbs are being pulled off, because you've been in this guy's POV so long, and you're still in the POV as this is happening. It feels like your limbs are being pulled off. Because at a certain point when you're watching it, it's almost like you become used to being Frank. So much so when you actually pull away from Frank, like you said, it's very alarming. Oh God, why am I not in Frank's POV all of a sudden?
Why am I not surrounded by the fuzzy glow of Elijah Wood?
Well, I ask myself that every day.
And speaking of the score, good lord, this is one of my favorite movie scores in recent years. I listen to it frequently, just isolated.
Can we just talk about how great it is that 80s synth scores are coming back?
It seems like every movie I see has an 80s synth score now. Drive, It Follows, Nightcrawler, The Guest. I love that this is becoming a movie score subgenre.
And I'm glad it's coming back, because, what's your opinion on why it's suddenly kind of making a resurgence besides, just fans liking it?
Honestly, I think it's just the generation that grew up listening to those soundtracks is making movies now.
Yeah. I think that's obviously the big pull, but I also think that the rediscovering of synth scores, I think fans look at it differently than most movie people look at it. People who grew up with the synth scores aren't looking at it as this, 80s pastiche or this 80s thing because 80s did synth scores. Which is funny because technically synth scores actually kind of started in the late 70s, but there's a very specific art to synth scores when played in the film, especially in horror films, that gives I think it's the best score for a horror film.
Yeah, there's that weird audible muscle memory when it comes to that kind of music that gives you that reflexive response.
Yeah, there's something almost when it's played in a horror film, there's a primal feeling to that synth. And I think it's going to make it come back in an artistic manner, not just in this kind of, 80s pastiche. Because, we've seen all kinds of scores in the last, 15 to 20 years at this point. And orchestral scores, I mean, you see orchestral scores in indie movies, for God's sake. And not that there's, not everything you can do with orchestral scores, but it's rediscovering an old art form and looking at it through fresh eyes of, there's a whole other mode to this film I can give it with this kind of music.
Yeah. It's like a well-done synth score. That alone can provide so much character. I mean, you can look at a recent movie like It Follows, where half of the movie is the score.
And synth scores have this way, like all good scores, but I think synth scores especially almost feels like this paintbrush coming over the scene. And there's something about synth scores that really bite into you deeply whenever it's playing. And over certain kinds of images, it really pulls you into that space. That's why I think it works so well with the POV, because you're in the POV, you have this, kind of really engulfing synth score around you. You're really in that headspace at that moment.
Yeah, it's like the soundtrack of his mind. So, I don't know how much weight there is behind this, but I have a theory on why synth scores are so closely tied to horror and sci-fi. And I honestly think it's because there's something about the fact that it's a purely synthetic form of music that upsets some weird primal part of your brain. Because look back at the first artificial music with the theremin that was used exclusively almost in sci-fi movies to signify an alien presence. Because there's just something in the back of your head that's like, no, that does not exist in nature. What the hell is this?
Nothing.
It unnerves you.
Yeah, nothing. The basic musical instruments made with hands can't really put the sound together. This is otherworldly sound.
Yeah, I really honestly think that's what it is. Because even I'm becoming a huge fan lately of this variety of music, and I love how it just puts you off just enough for you to not know what to expect. It's like, even as repetitive as a lot of synth can be, there's this weird feeling of, where is this music going to go in the next few notes?
There's something very primal when you're looking at horror images and that's playing. Almost like a tribal beat, when it's played over something really horrifying. I'm talking about It Follows. You see whatever that is walking with that synth score playing, and it just beats down on you. And it's,
here comes the invader.
Yeah, it's arresting. It's it's the music of Other, essentially, whenever it's used in a horror film.
Which is what makes it so great that's used in this movie with its POV, because it's like you are inhabiting this otherworldly presence, because the music pretty much does not stop from the beginning onward.
Oh, hell no.
It's always there in the background.
And I'm really glad that it's making such a comeback. I would love to see it, actually get out of the indie scene and back into some big films again. And kind of get out of, the pastiche mode. Because like we said, I mean, this does not take place in the 80s or anything, but there are characters called 80s Guy, and it's very aware of itself, but it's not using the pastiches like the synth score as pastiches. It's using them as another piece of art for the film. That's where I'd like to see those kind of scores keep going and evolving. I'd like to see it in a big action movie or something again.
Yeah, something beyond, hey, remember the 80s?
Yeah. And, the synth scores also remind you of a time where things were more stripped down, and not in a bad way, but in a, oh yeah, things were simpler. You can just watch a guy run across a room with a synth score playing. It was fucking exciting.
Well, look at the resurgence in 80s guys driving around Los Angeles movies.
Oh yeah, that's a subgenre now. Yeah, the score of Maniac was a big part of the film. It's not just adding to the scene; it is the scene.
Yeah, it's remake done right.
And dare I say, Box Office Pulp recommends the remake of Maniac.
You'll never understand the relationship Box Office Pulp shares with its mannequins.
Box Office Pulp doesn't want you to go out tonight.
You're staying here with Box Office Pulp.
And like that, he's gone.
This is Box Office Pulp Guy, and this has been a Pulp Podcast production. Now please, 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 put a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger and say goodnight.
And now, on with the show.
This meeting will come to order. The Legion of Pulp is now in session. In a moment, iTunes... Yes, Quizmotron.
I was wondering, Emperor Palpatine, if I could perhaps...
Box Office Pulp thinks we need a few items to pawn on the black market.
Box Office Pulp Guy, you have a podcast dedicated to movie analysis. Pinhead, your pleasure puzzles are deadly. Isaac, you've got corn.
Gone?
What more do you need?
How about a nuclear warhead?
What?
All the other supervillains have them. With a nuclear warhead, I shall leave all of the podcasts to tear themselves apart with paranoia.
Box Office Pulp wants a magic lasso to hang himself with.
Can I get a ship in a bottle kit?
I demand more corn.
To make my own ship in a bottle.
Oh, enough of this. The hell do I look like, Santa Claus? We're wasting valuable time. Right now, my Pulp drones are rewriting Apple's code to make our podcast #1 on iTunes.
Excuse me, Emperor.
Quizmotron, what is it?
All Quizmotron wants is pants. A decent pair of pants.
Darth Vader wants pants too.
Order!
Game is not supposed to be this complicated.
Tune in next week at PulpPodcastNetwork.wordpress.com.
I don't even know how I deal with any of you on a daily basis.